Dear devotees, dear spiritual seekers, in this video, I will address why simplicity is one of the key factors for the advancement on the path of bhakti. And we will start with reading the Srimad Bhagavatam, verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, which will actually show also on the screen for a little while so that you can see it. So this is Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 1, text number 2. And before I will read this verse from a sacred scripture, I just want to offer the respects, my obeisances. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this is one of the first verses in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and it is extremely beautiful. Dharma projita kaitavotra paramo nirmatsaranam satam vidyam vastavam atra vastu shivanam tapotra yonmulanam Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite Kim va pararishvara sadhyo hrida varudya tetra kritipi shushrushu bistat kshanat. And the translation goes like this. Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated, this Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart. The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity, is sufficient in itself for God realization. What is the need of any other scripture? As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam, by this culture of knowledge, the Supreme Lord is established within his heart. So this is a verse, a text that glorifies Srimad Bhagavatam, and it has a very long purport. But for our discussion today, I will only read a small portion of the purport and then explain it with regards to the simplicity in spiritual life. So, purport. Religion includes 4 primary subjects, namely pious activities, economic activities, satisfaction of the senses, and finally, liberation from material bondage. Irreligious life is a barbarous condition. Indeed, human life begins when religion begins. Eating, sleeping, feeding, and mating are the 4 principles of animal life. These are common both to animals and to human beings. But religion is the extra function of the human being. Without religion, human life is no better than animal life. Therefore, in human societies, there is some form of religion which aims at self-realization and which makes reference to man's eternal relationship with God. In the lower stages of human civilization, there is always competition to lord it over the material nature, or in other words, there is a continuous rivalry to satisfy the senses. Driven by such consciousness, man turns to religion. He thus performs pious activities or religious functions in order to gain something material. But if such material gains are obtainable in other ways, then so-called religion is neglected. This is the situation in modern civilization. Man is thriving economically, so at present he is not very interested in a religion. Churches, mosques, or temples are now practically vacant. Men are more interested in factories, shops, and cinemas than in religious places which were erected by their forefathers. This practically proves that religion is performed for some economic gains. Economic gains are needed for sense gratification. Often, when one is baffled in the pursuit of sense gratification, he takes to salvation and tries to become one with the Supreme Lord. Consequently, all these states are simply different types of sense gratification. So, before I comment on these very important points, I will say the invocation by which I am trying to obtain the blessings and the mercy of my spiritual teachers so that my words can be meaningful and can actually carry the true message which is coming down through the parampara to the disciplic succession of true spiritual masters, spiritual teachers. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupam Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapada Kamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvetam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchanga Gorange Radha Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shivasadi Gora Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So in this beautiful, beautiful text, we can actually read that the highest truth, it's a reality which is distinguished from illusion and is meant for the welfare of all humanity. And such truth uproots the threefold miseries. This is something extremely powerful and extremely important. And I will come back to this. And now from the commentary, what we read from the purport, we only read 2 paragraphs. And in the first paragraph, the essence was that in every human society, there is some form of spiritual practice, some form of spiritual advancement or religion. And this spiritual practice actually is aiming at self-realization and also trying to uncover a person's relationship with God or the Supreme Soul. And in the second paragraph, we actually read that in the lower stages of human civilization, even this religion or even the spiritual pursuit is covered with the lower modes of material nature. And because of this covered consciousness, because of this lower consciousness, people are trying to obtain their spiritual goals while at the same time aiming to achieve their material gains or material ambitions. So this is very common, and we can actually see if we look around ourselves, and if we look at the major religious systems and the people who are practicing some kind of religion or some kind of spiritual path, if we truly analyze it, we can see that great majority of people on every spiritual path, even on the path of bhakti or bhakti yoga or Krishna consciousness, the majority of people are actually trying to get some material benefit, some material profit from the spiritual practice. And this is what this particular text is addressing. And it's saying that this book, Srimad Bhagavatam, is completely rejected all religious activities which are materially motivated. And the words that are used here are kaitava. Kaitava means covered by fruitive intentions. So covered by, some motivation that there will be something for me, for my sense enjoyment, for my personal enjoyment, some material benefit I can get from this practice. But Srimad Bhagavatam, it's actually meant for these people who completely reject these selfish motives, who completely reject these selfish motives and who actually embrace the path of pure bhakti, or at least they are trying or praying for, preparing themselves for, to be able to practice pure bhakti. And what is pure bhakti? It is also called Uttama Bhakti. This is actually explained in another book, which is called Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. And this is one of the key verses in that book, which goes, Anyabilashita Shunyam Jnana Karma Anavritam Anukulena Krishna Nu Shilanam Bhaktir Uttamam. So this verse actually explains Anyabilashita Shunyam means that one actually rejects all desires, or actually it is better to say all material motives, because Anyabilashita refers to those desires which are as deeply rooted as one's nature, and it actually refers to a motive, so material motive. If we want to practice pure bhakti, then we have to reject these selfish motivations, selfish motives. And the next line says, Jnana Karma Anavritam, that one also cannot allow the activities of jnana, which means acquiring spiritual knowledge, or karma, which is performing different kinds of material activities, like ordinary material activities, like going to job or studying, pursuing your education. or even some rituals in India. This is more known, which are all performed for some kind of material benefit. So one who is on the path of pure bhakti can perform these activities, but these activities should not cover his spiritual practice of bhakti. What does this mean? This means that these activities should not become more important, should not become a priority in someone's life. Like, for example, someone is practicing bhakti, so it's rising early in the morning, chanting his japa, studying Srimad Bhagavatam, associating with devotees, doing some practical service, and at the same time he goes to school or studies. He's a student. So it is fine. It is no problem. One can go to school, one can study. But the point is, if I'm a student, for example, if because of my study, now I will just completely neglect my spiritual practice, or just stop with my spiritual practice because now the exam season has come. So I have to really focus on my school and my study. Then this means that this activity, which is in the category of karma, we could say, is covering over my practice of bhakti. So this is not good. It's not good. This is why it is important that it just stays within the framework. So we do our study, we do our exams, but we maintain consistent spiritual practice of bhakti. And in this way, actually, we can even achieve another step. And this is that we can transform the activity of studying at the university into spiritual activity. It will not be karma anymore if our consciousness is spiritualized, if our consciousness is elevated. And if we actually start performing this study, not only for our own benefit, for our own, profit, to monetize it at the end, but actually to use it as a service for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to actually use it for higher purpose in his service. Then even this activity of study becomes transformed and becomes spiritualized. It's not karma anymore. It becomes part of our bhakti. It becomes part of our devotional service. So you can see here this great difference. And then if we go on the next line, Anukulyena Krishna nu Shilanam means, Krishna nu Shilanam means continuous cultivation of bhakti, of Krishna conscious activities. And this also is divided into two categories. One is like practical activities that we do, like hearing, chanting, meditating, praying, doing all kinds of practical activities, practical services. And then there is also a more subtle category, and this is a bhava rupa, it's actually mentioned. And this involves our attitude, our emotion. And here the emotion and the attitude should be at least anukulyena. Anukulyena means favorable, so that we perform all these activities for the pleasure of the Supreme Lord, for the pleasure of Krishna. And even, hopefully, with our spiritual advancement gradually, we will perform these activities with affection and finally with love, out of love. So this is the very important factor in performing these activities. Anukulena Krishna Anushilanam, Bhaktir Uttama. So this is the highest form of bhakti, which is also known as pure bhakti, undiluted. It's uncovered by the material motives or the selfishness. So when we come to the practice of spiritual life in bhakti yoga, it is very natural that we have motives. And it is actually explained even in Bhagavad Gita that there are 4 kinds of motives that we have. So one motive is that we are looking for mitigation of our distress. The next motive is that we may be looking for some really tangible material benefit, even like trying to get wealth, money, possessions through our practice. Then the third is that we try to get knowledge, spiritual knowledge. And the fourth, actually the third is that we are very inquisitive. And inquisitive actually means that our real motive here is that we are trying to obtain happiness and mitigate distress in a long term, like really on a long term. Like in the first and second motive, in the first second to become free from distress, it was just like on the short term, like I'm suffering now, I have pain, so I turn to God, I turn to this bhakti because I heard that, yes, you feel better when you hear this chant, when you hear these sacred books, and when you eat this spiritualized food, prasadam, you feel better. So the misery goes away. So this is why I'm starting to associate with these people. Then the second, to gain some material benefits, is basically I want to get happiness from this practice of bhakti yoga. I want to get happiness, but happiness that I'm looking for, it's material. And material happiness is based on sense gratification. So it means I have to get something, material, something tangible. Either, some material gain, like in form of, like some money, some possession, some facility, or subtle in the form of position, respect, prestige, recognition. So then I will be happy. But the person the third category of a person who is inquisitive is much more intelligent, because he wants to gain the happiness, like a final happiness, like a real happiness, not just temporary happiness for a short time, and not to become free from misery just for a short period of time, but to finally become free. So this is the motivation of a person in the third category who is inquisitive, and it's actually very good for a beginner to start. And the fourth motivation is to gain true knowledge, to really gain the true knowledge. So the fourth motivation is the best, but it is still not completely pure. But when we start then with the path of bhakti, and when we start practicing bhakti, when we start acquiring the knowledge of sambandha, which means when we start to understand our true position in this world, when we start to understand what is our relationship with this material world, with this material energy, and what is our relationship with the Supreme Person, the Ishvara, the Supreme Controller, And we also start to understand who we really are. What is our real constitutional position as a spiritual being, as a spirit soul? When we actually obtain this knowledge of Sambandha, then it is actually the time to really start preparing ourselves for practice of pure devotional service and not be satisfied any longer with this motivated practice, which is also called mixed devotional service. Mixed devotional service means that we have these material motives. We try to gain something out of our spiritual practice, and we are covered with the modes of passion and with the modes of ignorance, and of course also with the mode of goodness. Because pure devotional service is actually performed under the shelter of the spiritual energy in Vishuddha Sattva, which is a transcendental goodness, completely pure, with no tinges of material energy, material modes. So it definitely takes some time before a spiritual practitioner can come to the level of performing pure devotional service on the transcendental platform. However, we can practice pure devotional service even before we are completely purified, even before we are completely purified of these lower modes of material energy. And the key here is that we really accept the shelter of our spiritual master, that we fully take shelter of him, and that we really sincerely, with great eagerness and dedication, follow his instructions. So here is also this simplicity. Simplicity in a sense that we give up other motives and we dedicate ourselves to the service of our spiritual master, of our spiritual teacher. And we really start slowly to identify our pleasure with his pleasure, which means that my whole life is actually meant for service and the satisfaction of my spiritual master, of my spiritual teacher. And if he's happy with what I'm doing, if he's happy with my endeavor, then I am happy too. This is where my pleasure and my happiness is coming from. It's coming from the pleasure and happiness of my guru, of my teacher. And this is actually also the truth, because when we please our guru, when we please our spiritual teacher, then the Supreme Personality of Godhead is pleased. And when the Supreme Personality of Godhead is pleased, then automatically he gives pleasure and happiness to our heart, because he resides in our heart as the super soul, and from him comes from him comes the intelligence, from him comes the knowledge, from him comes the forgetfulness, and from him also comes the different emotional experiences that we may have on our spiritual path. So when we are acting in such a way that he is pleased, then he gives us pleasure. And when we act in the way which is displeasing to him, then surely he will instill in our heart some unpleasant feelings. We will not feel happy. We will feel empty. We will feel dissatisfied. We will feel restless. So my whole point in this short class of Srimad Bhagavatam today is this one-pointedness and simplicity in our practice of bhakti, of trying to cultivate this dedication to the service and instruction of my spiritual teacher, of my spiritual master, and not to try to obtain happiness from other sources. It is not needed, because if we can please our Guru, if we can please the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then all happiness is there, right here, now, for every one of us. So I will stop here. And if you have any questions, any additional points, or any realizations on this point, then I will be most happy if you can write them in the comments section. And you can also write some other topics that are of interest for you in this new series of lectures that I'm starting now, which are all on the verses from Srimad Bhagavatam.